one they fear. In their tongue, he is Dovahkiin, Dragonborn.
This scholarly young knight has spent years honing the arts of diplomacy and linguistics. Even before discovering his destiny as the Dragonborn, he understood the Draconic language. And now, empowered with the destiny of the Dragonborn, he will use the Thu'um to save the peoples of Tamriel and serve right and justice. Tested on legendary difficulties, your experience may differ. Modlist after the character story. The Knight of the Dragon begins the game with a full set of Blade's armor. In addition, he wears an amulet of Talos and a Greybeard mantle, both of which reduce his shout cooldowns. For his weapon, he wields an iron greatsword, although he should upgrade that to the next set of material whenever possible. Ultimately, when the character is proficient enough in blacksmithing, he will be able to craft a full set of Dragon Knight armor, as well as a Dragonbone sword. The Dragon Knight armor will be the final step of this character's progression. Because of his past, he will begin the game knowing several dragon shouts already. However, the most important dragon shout he knows is the Dragon Aspect. The Dragon Aspect will allow him to more or less become a dragon. Dragon Aspect will last for 10 real-life minutes, but it can only be invoked once per game day. While taking on the aspect of the dragon, the character will not receive falling damage. In addition, they can use a Fire Breath spell, a Frost Breath spell, a spell to conjure a Fire Worm, which will be your loyal minion until it dies, and most importantly, the power to fly. The act of flying will rapidly deplete your character's magicka, and if your character runs out of magicka or stamina during flight, the character will fall to the ground. While flying with your greatsword out, you'll be able to attack with a Blade of Blood. The Blade of Blood deals significantly more damage than a normal melee strike would. However, it is considered a power attack and will drain your stamina to use. The act of shooting a Blade of Blood is clunky and difficult to aim properly, but it has an exceedingly high amount of power. Aside from the spells that the knight gains by using the Draconic aspect, the character is not a spellcaster and will not be able to learn additional magics. Instead, the knight will rely on dragon shouts. Even when not in Draconic aspect, each shout will have its own individualized cooldown, allowing access to a various battery of ranged attacks. And as the character goes and learns new words and kills dragons to unlock those shouts, so too will the character's ranged offense increase. Simply put, dragon shouts are to this character as magic is to other characters. And under no circumstances should this character feel that he's entirely reliant on Dragon Aspect for common fights. Dragon Aspect is a tool that makes your character overpowered, and can be thought of as more or less a clutch mode used to give you an edge when fighting dragons or other situations where your character is vastly outnumbered. The access to the different signature abilities of the Dragon Aspect will allow you to survive fights that you couldn't normally survive in higher difficulty levels. As a former knight, he is no longer bound to the chivalrous code of his former knighthood, but still he strives to do what he feels is right. He has a sense of duty about helping other people, and as such will take on bounty letters and dragon slaying requests frequently. He will seek out and kill bandits, trolls, and other threats, doing anything and everything in order to make Skyrim a safer place. That said, upholding Imperial law is no longer his responsibility. Unlike other knights, he will break the law in various ways, including stealing if he feels it's for the greater good. And that is the emphasis with this character. For the greater good. The Knight of the Dragon will always seek to serve right and justice. Justice not implying the imperial way of justice, but a greater, more broad sense of justice. He continually seeks out ways to serve right and justice. When he's approached about joining the Dawn Guard, saving Skyrim from the growing vampire menace, he will do so without hesitation. And although he will begin many a journey, many a quest, Ultimately, it will always come back to the dragons. The dragons are coming back, and they need to be dealt with for the peoples of Tamriel. And so that is what the Knight of the Dragon will do. He will set off on the main quest of Skyrim and defeat Ulduin. He will almost immediately be aware of the dragon shouts that he is learning, and will continue to seek out more dragon shouts. He will periodically, from time to time, return to High Hrothgar's library and meditate there, gaining new insights into the way of the voice. Now, other than the spells he gains from entering Dragon Aspect, he is unable to cast magic, and as a result, he seeks out more and more dragon shouts. He wants to become a master of the Thu'um, because for him, that is his magic. Although he will from time to time take up Daedric quests, he would never under any circumstances sacrifice an innocent for the promise of power from a Daedric prince. In order to better understand his Nordic roots and satisfy his questions as a warrior scholar, he would join the companions and make their destiny his own. As he embraced the way of the dragon, so too would he embrace the way of the werewolf, learning how to become one with the beast, using that in conjunction with his draconic aspect to pretty much be unstoppable at any time. With his departure from Hammerfell, his last ties to the Empire had been severed, and as a result, he probably would not side with the Empire in the Civil War after hearing the plight of his fellow Nords. In his mind, freedom and justice walk hand in hand together, and what is right is not what the Thalmor wants. And while he bears no hatred for the Thalmor or Elven kind, he cannot abide the oppression put forth by the Thalmor forces, and he will challenge their beliefs in dialogue whenever he comes across Thalmor Justiciars. And if that causes the Thalmor Justiciars to attack him, then he is perfectly justified in defending himself. Before he became a knight, he was an expert in linguistics and court politics. Diplomacy is part of his nature, and he will always try to talk things out first. However, if the only choices available to him are ones that do not fit with his idea of right and justice, then he will resort to force, because force is something intrinsic to a knight, is intrinsic to a Nord warrior. And he will always seek force if it is required to save lives and serve right and justice. In High Rock there stands a great tower. Some call it the Dreeny Tower. Others call it the Adamantine Tower. But it is known by some scholars to be the throne of creation. It is the only place known to have existed physically prior to the finalization of Nirn. It was there that Magnus and the other ancient eternal spirits gathered and laid the groundwork for the creation of Nirn, deciding which ancient eternal spirits would sacrifice themselves to become which parts of the earth bones, which parts of the world itself. And through the conduits known as the Towers, they would be connected through all of creation. Although Lorkhan was indisputably the world's creator, Magnus was its architect, and the world he envisioned was one that was a paradise for all the ancient eternal spirits to live in. However, moments before the finalization of Nirn, Magnus uncovered something that Lorkhan had been hiding from him. Although he gathered all the ancient eternal spirits he could together at the Adamantine Tower, there were countless majority that he could not reach in time. As Nirn reached its completion, many ancient eternal spirits began to die, and others felt their powers waning. Magnus ascended into the heavens, retreating to Aetherius. He tore a hole through creation, through which the light of Aetherius pours through. This hole would be known as the sun. Those who followed him would be known as the Magna G. The holes they tore through into Aetherius would become the stars. Magicka is most literally the power of Aetherius that leaks through the sun and stars. The most elder and powerful of the ancient eternal spirits were able to, for the most part, retain their original forms despite being trapped within Mundus. What originally appeared to be more of a natural formation became the Adamantine Tower we know today, when Ariel stood before all the ancient spirits that had retained their original forms. He incited them to turn against Lorkhan for his treachery. And while that is a story for another day, the ancient spirits that sided with him became known as the Aedra. They became the Divines. And although their names and representative forms would change based on the race that worshipped them, their true bodies would exist in space as the planets orbiting Nirn. It was during this time that the other ancient eternal spirits were landing in Nirn, and based on where they landed, they took on different physical forms. They would be known as the Wandering Elnathe. Eventually their powers would fade and they would become all manner of creatures. However, it is said that a large portion of the Wandering Elnathe had not yet had their powers fade. And before this occurred, Kinnereth, as the Imperials call her, or Kine, as the Nords call her, Lorkhan's widow, came before them and gave them the forms of humans. However, something important to know about ancient eternal spirits is that they are too great to be represented within creation as just one form. They have what are known as aspects. Sometimes these aspects will act as an agent for the Divine's will, in the case of Talos taking the form of Wolf to speak to the hero of Morrowind, the Nevinyrine, before his epic fight with Dagoth-Ur. However, in the case of Akatosh, God of Time, or his original incarnation, Ariel, he is representative of time, and as such his will transcends the past, present, and future. Before Ariel truly came into being as time itself, the ancient eternal spirits that existed then did not have a true sense of self and awareness and purpose. Those came with time itself. So Ariel, or his later incarnation, Akatosh, are the essence of time, both in and out of the mortal universe. All things, both within Mundus, the material plane, and Oblivion and Aetherius beyond, are all subject to Akatosh, or time. This includes both Aedra and Daedra. And while the Akatosh that exists in Nirn is bound to a certain time frame, the Akatosh that is time everywhere is not. And that Akatosh that represents both the beginning and the end of time is represented in various forms, including Alduin. Time is both linear and circular. What this means is that after time has reached its course, it is over, Alduin will eat all of Nirn, all of Mundus, all Divines, all Daedra, Oblivion, and Aetherius. All of creation will be devoured, and then the cycle will begin anew. The time frame in which all of this is occurring has already repeated itself many times. And although the greater incarnation of Alduin, and consequently Akatosh, remembers these cycles, the mortal incarnations do not. This leads some people to say that Alduin and Akatosh are one and the same. They are not. They are both incarnations of time, and they have very different ideas and thoughts, as one is the foundation and creation of time, and the other is the devouring and destruction of time. The cycle repeats itself countless times, but with countless variations, and so too do Alduin and Akatosh change their actions during each loop. Although Alduin had done this previously at the end of time, this is the first time that Alduin has incarnated himself as a dragon in the beginning, closer to the start of the loop. The Dova, or dragons, are the closest things to Aedra that exist as mortals. And when discussing Akatosh, Alduin, and dragons, I use the word mortal, meaning existing on the physical plane. Obviously, dragons do not age or die of natural causes as we do, However, they are made of flesh, blood, bone, and spirit, just like all other mortals, descended from the old and wandering Elnaphase. However, dragons have born into them not only a language, but several drives, most in particular, the will to dominate all life. This includes other dragons, and as such, in the beginning, they were solitary creatures that warred amongst one another. It is theorized that in this particular loop of time, if Alduin had not incarnated himself as a dragon in the past, that the dragons would never have come together as a species, as they did. There are so many things we don't know about the dragons and the extent of Alduin's influence. Whether or not the dragon language would be born into them if Alduin had not incarnated himself. Likewise, would dragon language have the power to manipulate reality as it can? Would dragons be as ageless and eternal had it not been for Alduin's influence? When Alduin performs his role as the World Eater at the end of time, he is dominating all life through extinguishing it. But having incarnated himself into the distant past, toward the beginning of time, not intending to perform his role as the World Eater for some time, he still had the dragon's drive to dominate. And that is what led him to unite the dragons, to subjugate the humans under the dragon cult, and to begin his reign on Akavir. The dragons that did not agree with Alduin left Akavir and scattered to the other lands of Nirn. Many dragons ended up in Skyrim and High Rock, caring not for the dragon culture that was evolving on Akavir. They would become legend on Tamriel as hoarders of wealth. Remember, the Tamrielic dragons were solitary creatures that lived in dens far removed from people, and only came out to hunt, feed, and obtain more wealth. Although it is a known fact that dragons live forever and don't lay eggs, in the layers owned by the dragons of High Rock, baby dragons known as draglings began to appear guarding their nests. These draglings also spoke the dragon language, and so in time, Ayleid and Man-Marie alike would learn the dragon language, although merely speaking the word was not the same as uttering a word of power. And aside from the ability to communicate with the baby dragons, there was nothing more that could be done with it. Seeking to gain domination over other lands as well, Alduin came to Skyrim and subjugated the dragons that were living there, placing them under his command. It had only been a generation or two since the Admoran people exterminated the Snow Elves. With no rivals for them in Skyrim, the new race of Nords was a weak one. In the face of the reality-altering power of the Thu'um and Alduin's endless fortitude, the Nords quickly had no choice but to bow down before their dragon overlords. Although Alduin had asserted his dominion over the peoples of Skyrim, he had had his fill of managing humans back on Akavir, so instead he set about the task of raising up some humans to rule other humans. Only the most powerful of those who gave themselves to him willingly would be risen up as dragon priests. They were promised powers beyond their station and life everlasting. And compared to the feeble, conquered Nords, they were like gods. Alduin underestimated two things. One, his importance in holding the dragon society together, and two, the strength and resolve of the humans. With Alduin away, the humans of Akavir rebelled, forming a faction known as the Dragon Guard. They systematically eradicated all the dragons on the continent. Back on Skyrim, human fought against human as the dragon cult battled against the Admoran forces and their Nordic descendants. Even in their older and weakened condition, they easily defeated the humans that supported the dragons. That's when the dragons entered the battle, and it seemed as if the dragon war was going to end in the dragon's favor. It was a betrayal of the highest order that turned the tide in the dragon war. Alduin's lieutenant, known as Ambition, Overlord, Cruelty in the dragon language, Parthenax, communicated with the goddess Kennereth. The details of what was said is not known. However, at the end of their meeting, Paarthurnax took his followers and rebelled against Alduin. Paarthurnax taught the Nords who would follow him not only the dragon language, but how to use the words of power, the Thu'um, to alter reality as the dragons do. But because Alduin and Paarthurnax were both able to revive their fallen comrades using the voice, the war seemed to go on without end. That is, until the day 3 legendary Nord warriors confronted Alduin and battled him to the death. Harnessing the very same power that Alduin put into his Thu'um, they twisted the words around and created new words of power. Although these words were understood in the context of humans, using the Thu'um, they were forced upon Alduin. The words were mortal, finite, and temporary. Dragons may not be gods, but they are eternal and ever-living. The concept of true death is alien to them. This concept was forced upon Alduin to where he could actually die in his mortal form. Alduin is strongest at the end of time, and as a result, when he faced those Nord warriors, he was actually at his weakest. Even if Alduin's physical incarnation were killed in this battle, the oversoul of him that exists as the end of time would still exist. He would still be the end of the universe. However, the him that physically incarnated early to dominate all life would disappear from the world. But even so, the 3 legendary heroes were unable to defeat him. And so, using an Elder Scroll, the last remaining warrior banished Alduin forever. Or so they thought. In reality, Alduin was sent to the future, where he would battle the last Dragonborn, you. And because Alduin is strongest at the end of time, so being sent into the future has made him that much stronger. However, still but an infant compared to the true power that will devour everything at the end of time. This will occur regardless of whether or not he dominates the world in his physical incarnation or is destroyed in his physical incarnation. The true Alduin that exists outside of the universe will devour the entirety of the universe and all creation, and time will start again. After Alduin's defeat, the Dragon Guard on Akavir would go and kill every last dragon. But unsatisfied with their victory, they would travel to Tamriel and continue the extermination. By this point in history, the Elysian Empire had already given way to the dynasty of Raymond Cyrodiil. And although Nords, Bretons, Redguards, and Elves were no match for the Akaviri Dragon Guard, it was Raymond Cyrodiil's imperial forces that would utterly defeat the Dragon Guard. From this point in time, the Akaviri Dragon Guard would split into 2 forces. Those who maintained their pride as the Dragon Guard would travel to High Rock and live in exile. However, those who were not prideful, those who were patient, discovered that Raymond Cyrodiil was in fact Dragonborn, the person they had been seeking the whole time. Therefore, they pledged themselves to Emperor Raymond's service. Eventually, the Imperial bodyguards would shed the name Dragon Guard and become the Blades. As for the exiled Dragon Guard, they found a home in the kingdom of Daggerfall, in the corner of High Rock. The protectors of Daggerfall were known as the Knights of the Dragon, and for a long time they had battled against the dragons that inhabited High Rock, completely detached from Alduin and his rule. These greedy, solitary beasts commanded armies of lesser draglings, and had proven quite difficult to exterminate even by the knights. Able to take up their mantle as Dragon Guard once again, they pledged their services to Daggerfall under the condition that they would be the vanguard for exterminating dragons. Unlike when a Dragonborn absorbs the soul of a dragon, these dragons left their blood and flesh behind, and the Knights of the Dragon found a use for it. By performing certain rites and rituals, the Dragon Guard were able to emulate magic. Not quite the strength of a Dragonborn, but far superior to any mere warriors that had come before. And so during the era of the Daggerfall Coven, These warriors would be known as the Dragon Knights, and were able to tap into draconic powers to fuel their battle prowess. Eventually, the remaining dragons scattered to the four winds, and they were assumed to have been wiped out. However, hordes of draglings still haunt the halls of Daggerfall even today, and their blood and flesh may be used to create new Dragon Knights. But the Grand Masters who understood how the Dragon Knights' rituals were performed eventually died out. And with the breaking of the Daggerfall Coven, the knowledge to create Dragon Knights was lost. Completely convinced that all dragons had been wiped out, the Knights of the Dragon hung up their dragon-slaying gear for good, and became permanent bodyguards to the Daggerfall royal family. However, time and time again we are shown that dragons are not easily wiped out. And in the closing years of the Second Era, as Tiber Septim conquered the world, he did so with dragons under his command.
My name is Nephalalagus. I am Tiber Septim's proud soldier, loyal vassal, a jewel of the crown. I shan't lie to you, good stranger. My imperial loyalty is indeed well paid for.
Although the history books would not reflect this, countless dragons survived the supposed extermination, and no one can be sure how many are left alive in Tamriel. And time again it has been proven that a Dragonborn rises to become the master of dragons. Driven to their destiny by forces that we can scarcely understand, almost every time a Dragonborn appears, the course of history changes with them. The Knight of the Dragon is a Nord, born in High Rock. His mother was a blacksmith, living in the town of Longshire, just east of the capital city of Daggerfall. His father, on the other hand, was a Breton, Lord Bridwell, descendant of the leader of the Knights of the Dragon, and lead bodyguard for Daggerfall's royal family. The Knight of the Dragon spent his early years hearing heroic tales of knights, and so he created in his mind an idealized version of what a knight should be, based on those fairy tales. As he was the child of a noble lord, he was expected to become literate, but in his classes he discovered that he actually liked to read, and in between swordsmanship training by his father, and other forms of basic climbing, running, swimming, lessons by other household members, he would often sneak away and read history books. He became quite an expert on the history of the Iliac Bay. The parts of history that interested him the most were the time of the Daggerfall Coven, which had very little written about it, and further back before that, the time that dragons openly roamed High Rock. Fact and fiction blended together into a mass of stories about heroic knights that would go and slay dragons, about imperial agents that would turn out to be the saviors, about the Nevinyrine, the eternal champion, the champion of Cyrodiil. And so the Knight of the Dragon, too, dreamed of being a hero. When he was big enough to fit into a full suit of armor, he traveled to the nearby crypts and even dungeons and began exploring. Although his father had trained him to use a short sword and shield, he found that using a two-handed sword felt a lot more natural to him. And rather than blocking with a shield, he could parry with the blade, while simultaneously using it as a weapon. When his instructors saw him wielding this colossal blade that he had picked up in a local dungeon, they were shocked at the amount of stamina he had to be able to wield this massive blade, almost as if he had been doing it his entire life. His entire adolescence was spent dungeon crawling, and he had killed all manner of monsters, from centaurs to spriggans to ogres. But he was most shocked with his first encounter with a baby dragon. Upon seeing him, the dragling's first reaction was to attack. However, when it spoke, he could understand it, and when he replied to it, it could understand him. It immediately stopped attacking, and he had discovered that he had wandered into a dragling nest. He asked the baby dragon how it could speak common. The dragling replied that he was speaking its language. The dragling led him back to a large chamber, where the dragon language was written all over, engraved in the stones of the dungeon, and inscribed into husks of metal that had been scattered around. What he found was more or less the diary of a dragon that had long departed this cave. The journal entries spoke of how he took human form and walked among the people for some time. How he watched the dynasties of Raymond Cyrodiil, the Dragonborn, and the other Dragonborn, Tiber Septim, found their empires. The scraps of metal were broken pieces of adventurers' armor who had died to the dragon. In some kind of twisted humor, the dragon had written epitaphs for each of them. Ignoring the twisted epitaphs, he instead focused on the carvings in the wall. In time, he would visit other dungeons and learn from other draglings the hidden locations of more dragon texts. His love for reading and his love for adventuring became one and the same. Some of the words he read in the dragon language popped out. He felt like these words should have some significance beyond their intended meaning. He just didn't know what they were. Before he could actually get into researching the words, he reached adulthood, and it was expected that he would join the Knights of the Dragon and become an apprentice under them. Although deep down he felt there were areas he should be looking into in his life, as not to disappoint his father, he followed his obligations and joined the Knights. He found, however, that being a Knight of the Dragon differed greatly from his childhood expectations. There was a lot of nuance and politics involved in being a knight. Though his assignments as a member of the knightly order took him to the various parts of the Iliac Bay, he was never once free. He had to guard his words, and there was quite a bit of prejudice against the Daggerfall region that he couldn't overcome due to him wearing the emblem of Daggerfall. He rose through the ranks quickly, and under a year he had transcended the aspirant, squire, and gallant ranks. After being awarded the gallant rank, he was awarded a post in Castle Daggerfall, specifically with the protection of the cousin of the current king of Daggerfall. Technically second cousin on the king's mother's side, she was a socialite by profession and an insatiable thief. Although she had no need of money, she stole due to a compulsion, a flaw in her personality that drove her to steal. It was very irrational, and her handmaiden had done her best to hide it from everybody. When a visiting dignitary from Cyrodiil had a priceless possession stolen from him during his stay, the cousin evaded responsibility by placing the item in the knight's possession. As the castle was searched, eventually the knight's quarters were searched as well, and the priceless possession was found. The Knight of the Dragon was wrongfully expelled from the Order of Knights and returned to Longshire in disgrace. His mother offered to take him as an apprentice blacksmith, but he already knew that life wasn't for him. When he told her he was going to seek his destiny elsewhere, she gathered up a bundle for him. This bundle had blacksmithing plans handed down to her from her grandparents, ones that talked of how to craft armor for the Dragon Knights. In addition, it had an extremely durable yet clearly used cloak that was said to have come from Skyrim. He boarded a ship in the Iliac Bay traveling south to the city of Sentinel. He discovered there that the city had been sacked by corsairs. He attempted to help all the people there that he could, and when he could help no more, with only the knowledge of dragons that he had found in forgotten ruins as his guide, he sought out more ruins in Skyrim. And although he was no longer bound to the code of a knight, he still felt the need to help people. Although he was stopped at the border of Skyrim when Ulfric Stormcloak attempted to escape, they quickly noticed his knightly attire, and he explained the situation to the Imperials. Not about to allow himself to be captured, he was prepared to fight them. However, not wishing to fight a Knight of Daggerfall, the Imperials allowed him to pass unharmed. The fate of Ulfric Stormcloak and what occurred at Helgen were not known to him, as he traveled safely to Falkreath Hold. These 4 mods are going to give you the ability to use the Draconic aspect, its flight powers, and debug a few aspects of it. The Dragon aspect created by this mod will be usable once per day and will last 10 real-life minutes, and gain access to other powers while it's active. You'll need to go into the mod configuration menu of Flying mod, and I will explain that in the next section. While other flying and gliding mods have been created in the past, they don't operate under the same restrictions this mod does, and as a result, would cause your character to either be overpowered or would simply break with the current mod configuration. This is simply put the best way to do it. Thunderchild adds many new shouts to the game and a place in High Hrothgar to learn new shouts. Make sure to pick up the Percus Maximus patch for it as well. The Knight's Greybeard Mantle is going to come from Cloaks of Skyrim. This mod gives each shout an individualized cooldown. That means you could use Fus, immediately switch shouts to, say, Ice Form, and use that. And then switch shouts to Wold and charge through. So on, so forth. It makes a shouting-based character possible. The Knight of the Dragon will use Akaviri, that is to say, Blades armor, until he levels up his blacksmithing sufficiently, after which he will be able to craft this Dragon Knight armor set that will also suit his character. The point at which you are fully clad in this set and know all the shouts, your character progression is complete. As a knight, he has absolutely zero experience opening locks, so instead, he bashes them open. With this mod, you're going to need to go into the mod configuration menu and enable lock bashing, but once you do, just hitting it with your two-handed sword should open the lock, depending on your weapon skill. 25, 50, 75, and 100 are the skill level thresholds on your weapon to unlock locks, based on their difficulty. These mods improve the moral choice system of Skyrim, giving you alternate ways to do Boethia and Nimira's quests, as well as a way to destroy the Thieves Guild. There is also an alternate way to do Innocence Lost, that is the Dark Brotherhood introduction quest. Instead of killing Grod the Kind yourself, you'll be able to report her to a guard. She'll resist arrest and die, thereby completing the quest and allowing you to kill Astrid and get the Destroy the Dark Brotherhood questline as well. Unlike other builds, there are no mod-based perks that are absolutely required. As such, the overhaul you want to use is up to your discretion. I fully tested this using Percus Maximus, however other builds would work as well. The character does not use magic, therefore the magic trees can be completely disregarded, but if you want to use either Spurg or Percus Maximus in order to better enhance your shouts, that would be recommended. Open Cities is not the most stable mod in the world, and can really introduce some script lag and other problems to your game. However, if you are running on a top-notch computer, I do recommend giving it a try on a separate save. It's going to take all the cities that you normally had to load screen into and place them physically within the game world to where you can literally, with your Dragon Knight flying powers, just fly over the city wall and into the city. That's the only reason I'm recommending it, because it synergizes so well with your dragon powers. Upon starting a new game with Skyrim Unbound, you will see the usual Bethesda and Skyrim logos. Don't be fooled by the Skyrim logo, you are now at the Ruins of Helgen. It will tell you to open the mod configuration menu. Do so by hitting Escape and hitting Mod Configuration. Under Skyrim Unbound's core settings, you're going to want to set the character's class as the Warrior. However, for the birth sign, you will set it as the Atronach. He was born under the sign of the Atronach, and as such, he can absorb magic to refill his Magicka bar. This is important because he will consume Magicka while flying, so if a dragon were to breathe on him in mid-air, its breath would actually be refilling his ability to fly. For dragons, go ahead and set them on walls and spawns, thus you'll be able to encounter dragons right away upon starting the game. For dragon souls, set yourself as Dragonborn. And for spells, make sure your character has it set to nothing, as your character will not be using magic. For the weapon type, go ahead and switch it from Battle Axe to Great Sword. The outfit should be heavy armor, and leave everything else alone, with the character starting with 0 septums. At the starting location, go ahead and set City as Falkrith, as this will be where the character starts. As soon as Falkrith is selected, go back and make sure all the options are correct. After you do this, begin your adventure. Open up the command console and type Player, Mod, AV, Magicka, and put in 50. Your character now has a total of 200 Magicka. It is being artificially modded 50 by the game, and then the Atronach Stone is giving it an additional 50, allowing you to fly for great amounts of time, but still allowing you to drink Magicka potions to stay in flight longer, or landing only to take off again after your Magicka is regenerated. Next, open up your command console and type Help Flying Configuration. Under Flying Configuration, you should see several things, including a spell. Go ahead and teach the spell to yourself by typing player, period, add spell, and this code will be different depending on how you installed Skyrim and set up your mods. In other words, the first two characters will be different. In my case, it's 1-5. After which, type 01F56D. So everything in this code except the 1-5 will be the same. Once this is done, you will have Flying Configuration added. Go to your magic menu, select Flying Configuration, and hit the Powers button. We're going to go to Beta Collisions, and we're going to set it to Normal. This way, when you're flying, you're not clipping through things, instead you're actually colliding. Now under Effects, I recommend selecting Dragon. Now for Stamina Consumption, I recommend selecting No Stamina Consumption. This way, stamina will only be consumed when you actually attack or use your Blades of Blood while flying. Next, put in the following codes. Player, period, add item, 4B28B1. Then the following code is 81, then D1, and then F1. And you'll notice that the space between each of them means that what's actually happening is you're getting one of each item. Once this is done, go to your inventory and equip your new Blades gear. Next, type help MIRAAK, that's Miraak, the final boss of the Dragonborn expansion. Once this is done, you will see a series of codes. Take the first two letters of that code and type player, period, teach word, that's one word, teach word, space. Now use the mod code that you were given, the first two characters of Miraak's ID. That should be, in my case, 07. So, add in the following characters. That is 01DF93, 01DF94, and 01DF95. These will give you all three words of the dragon aspect shout. By going to your magic menu under shouts, you will now see the dragon aspect shout. You will have to kill dragons to unlock it. He learned these words deciphering the dragon language in his youth. They don't mean anything to him now, but when he kills a dragon and is able to absorb its soul and use that soul to unlock aspects of this shout, he will get stronger. And when he unlocks the third one, he will be able to fly. Either way, because we enabled dragons in Skyrim Unbound's mod configuration menu, you should be encountering them right away. Next, type help Greybeard Mantle. That's in quotes. The code that comes up will, of course, have the first two characters randomized based on your current loadout. Go ahead and type player, period, add item, the full item code, followed by space 1. The final code you want to put in is player, add item, CC846 space 1. This will give you an Amulet of Talos. Upon using the full dragon aspect of 3 words, it should add these spells to you. Go to Magic, and you'd be wise to set Fireball, Ice Storm, Summon Fireworm, and Seismic Toss to your bar. Seismic Toss is not very useful in the beginning, however it's good at stunning people so you can run away. Its Magicka cost is rather high. A better use of your Magicka is the Summon Fireworm ability, which creates a tank for you. But the Fireball and Ice Storm abilities have individualized shout cooldowns as well. Now under the power section you will see the flying spell that will allow you to fly around. However, your Magicka will drain rapidly as you fly. Depending on your speed, it may drain faster or slower. You can opt to land to regenerate your Magicka, and when your Magicka is fully regenerated, you can take off again. The Draconic aspect lasts for 10 real-life minutes, after which you'll be unable to re-engage it for a full day. Now, regardless of which perk overhaul you're using, in order to craft Dragon Knight armor, you'll need both Daedric and Dragon blacksmithing. As I mentioned earlier, under normal circumstances, your character progression is considered complete when you've fully crafted yourself a set of Dragon Knight armor, you're wielding a Dragonbone sword, and you have all the shouts at your disposal. That said, if you are using the Percus Maximus overhaul, it is highly recommended that you set your character's mastery as Warforged. This way, when you craft the Dragon Knight armor out of Dragonbone, that gear will weigh 40% less, have 30% increased armor, and wearing 4 pieces of it will give you the material bonus. This Warforged Dragonbone will not be enchantable. This character is not an enchanter. Now, all other perks I'm talking about will be in the Percus Maximus overhaul. However, if you're using a different overhaul, well, then just run it the way you want. Make sure to put at least 1 point into light weapon combat, which will increase the damage of your heavy weapons as well. Max out heavy weapon combat, make sure to get Open Wound, Boiling Point, and Scarred. Ending your progression up the tree with Great Cleave. Great Cleave will cause your regular attacks to hit all enemies in front of you, reducing the need for you to use any kind of AoE shouts. You should get the Linguist and the Prodigy of the Diplomat, allowing you to hire underlings straight from the beginning. It costs 1,000 gold to hire an underling, but they will fight to the death for you. As knights are trained in battlefield triage, it's expected that the knight would have at least the Physician perk in alchemy to make better health potions. Your points into the block tree should be minimal at best because you just want to increase block effectiveness and nothing else. Now, once again, assuming you're using Percus Maximus, you'll be able to reforge the armor, and then if you got the appropriate mastery, accelerate that into Warforged. Warforging these items will take 5 additional Dragon Bones. And you will notice almost immediately, while wearing a full Warforged set, the amazing bonuses that you'll get even though none of it's enchanted. The only thing that's up in the air as to what you should wear is a ring. Choose wisely. How can I even begin to put this? The Knight of the Dragon is the most Dragonborn that I will ever produce. Some of my characters were never intended to be the Dragonborn, and this guy is just through and through Dragonborn. Why did I give him Draconic aspect to begin with? Well, to enhance the build and make it fun. Immediately, right off the bat, we'll be able to go to the powers section, select the flying spell, which will drain our magicka to use, but will get us over to that keep in short order. Now, I do other character builds to keep the game interesting, to change up the mechanics as much as possible, to have something brand new from the same old experience. Now, you notice some animation errors. That's due to script lag and the fact that I'm loading a hell of a lot of stuff at once. The better your computer, the faster the animations write themselves. But when it comes right down to it, Blade of Blood against a regular bandit, dead, dead, dead. Now, while not flying, because my stamina just ran out and I kind of fell to the ground, you can use Frost Breath, just takes care of that one. Next one, we'll use Fire Breath. Or just cut her head off, that works too. The whole point is that this character is the good archetype of the Dragonborn. Yes, he is more dragon than any other possibility for the Dragonborn, other than becoming a dragon explicitly. But it makes sense, using the Thuum to transform yourself into a dragon-like beast. You know, and you can tell it's all just Thuum-created energy. That's what these wings are, it's what the tail is, it's what the horns are. They are standard Dragonborn armor. We just took the Dragonborn concept and accelerated it. That's what the mod makers did, and I just decided, okay, well, what if he had these powers to begin with, they just hadn't woken up yet? And that was the idea. But yeah, unlike the Cryomancer or the Bone Lord of Worms or any of the other builds, there really isn't a huge matter of depth to the character in terms of mechanics. You just use your dragon shouts, go in, hack their faces off. It's that simple. And when someone gets in your way, again, just switch dragon shouts, make him not in your way, and continue the slaughter. Again, Atronach, don't care. But by just rapidly changing your shouts, you basically have a constant chain of magical damage you can dish out. And there really isn't anything that can stop you. And if for any reason you ever get in danger of dying, whirlwind sprint away! And then as soon as you're far enough away after the whirlwind sprint, just take to the air with the flying spell. Admittedly, the dragon aspect shouldn't be used all the time because it can't. It's got a cooldown for a reason. But it's a good trump card, and it's good for fighting dragons when you're using a dragon difficulty mod. And I'd recommend either deadly dragons or elemental dragons, but I can't guarantee their compatibility with some of the other mods. You'll have to look into that yourself. Now you notice that ward did actually protect against my fire breath there, which is my highest damaging breath attack. Instead, we're going to use Unrelenting Force to knock her down. She even dodged that, so just a direct charge and stab. Either way, she can barely hurt me. Remember, when in doubt, cast your Fireworm. It will act as a pseudo-tank for you, and it'll raise your conjuration skill. This Arc Cryomancer is a little harder than the average one, but Fire Breath to an Arc Cryomancer's face should deal a decent amount of damage. Get him to stop hitting me, maybe. Nope, not gonna happen. And we got him. Good. But when it comes right to it, when you finish Thunderchild, you should have enough shouts to get you through any situation whatsoever. So the character starts off fairly mild, and you might not be able to take on legendary difficulty unless you really abuse the flying, and I don't recommend that. I don't even recommend unlocking flying until you've actually killed the dragons. If you do decide that you just gotta have that flying spell early and you can't live without it, start the game off and type player, mod AV, Dragon Souls 3. That will give you 3 Dragon Souls. 1 for each step of the dragon aspect shout. And that'll get you to a point where you can do that from the beginning. Again, I don't recommend it. I would suggest just playing through until you've killed 3 dragons. But at the same time, this build really isn't viable for legendary difficulty until you've basically gotten this form anyway. So, kind of a catch. Wow, Ice Form triggered the pressure plate. Then we're going to slow time. And while time is slowed, we're going to mark her for death. She dodged the marked death, unfortunately. But we'll Fus Ro Dah her. And while she's Fus Ro Dah'd, we will quickly go in for the execution. As we can see, it didn't really end her life, but between a fire breath to the face, another slash. You notice that it takes about 2 slashes for the shout timer to be up, the global shout timer. There are 2 shout timers, a global shout timer and a per shout timer. Anyway, the global shout timer takes about 2 swings of your weapon, and then that's all we say for her. She died. But as I was saying, killing dragons when the game has just started may not be possible for this character build on legendary difficulty. This character is about progression. That's why you start off with the Blades armor, and then you build up to the dragon armor. And how you're expected to build up your skill is by replacing your sword. You start out with the greatsword, and then you replace it with steel, and so on and so forth, until it's dragonbone. And once you've filled out the smithing tree, you'll be able to get the dragonplate armor. And if you're playing Percus Maximus, you'll be able to warforge that dragonplate armor for some pretty amazing stuff. Now, as far as my channel and voting goes, there really won't be a change in how the format is. The next build has already been decided by voting, which is an Argonian vampire, known as the Champion of Cold Harbor. I was rather impressed how I just started testing the Champion of Cold Harbor right when Fudge Muppet came out with their own Champion of Molag Bal build. And I was just kind of floored at that. Now, I'm wasting a lot of time. I could be shouting, so let's shout her down. And before she can get up, let's freeze her in place. I guess the Frost Breath really didn't freeze her in place, but the Ice Form will. Either way. Yeah, Fudge Muppet came out with the same build, basic idea. Obviously, I'm going to take mod-based mechanics and change up how it's played in its entirety. I just find the incidental timing to be funny. I don't think there's any real correlation between the two builds other than their fancy name. Their idea for a Champion of Molag Bal is very different from mine, but I still went ahead and threw my mod suggestions on there, which are actually a few that I'll be using for the Champion of Cold Harbor. Now, an interesting thing to note about Fudge Muppet, they actually started doing modded builds themselves. Every other break down that door, hell yeah, that's how he rolls, by the way. He is not able to use lockpicking normally, that's part of the character. So instead we bust down doors with our sword. As I was saying, they are actually doing modded builds now, and it's rather impressive to me that they've finally moved on to that, and I look forward to seeing more of their modded builds and what they have in store. As you know, I kind of go a little lore crazy when I work on these builds, so I realize that my ideas are never compatible with theirs, even though I really like their ideas. One thing you have to know, though, is that if you want the lore true and unedited, go to the Imperial Library. I use the Imperial Library as a resource. However, I also throw my own spin on things. What I put up for builds could closely be thought of as fan fiction, with about 60 to 80% of it being real. Now, this guy needs a Fus Ro Dah. We'll slow time. Then while time is slowed, we'll disarm him. And now we'll chop him to pieces. Now, if you're wondering about the flying spell, Dragon Aspect is canon. However, the ability to fly is actually up in the air. In theory, a Dragonborn gaining the Dragon Aspect shout could do this. However, you'll notice that I had all of my stuff drained all of a sudden, which pisses me off. When it comes right down to it, Elder Scrolls lore contradicts itself and is, well, very broken. And the Bethesda that wrote Elder Scrolls 1, 2, and 3, as well as the side stories Legends and Battlespire, as Legends, Battlespire, and Adventures Redguard, that whole team was not the team that did Oblivion, was not the team that did Skyrim. As such, they all have very different ideas about how certain things work, and it turns out not so well. Like, there was no real consensus, and this is compounded by the utter failure of ZeniMax Online Studios to actually adhere to the lore. Dragon Knights had no place in the lore, but they added them to ESO anyway. So I made up a bullshit theory about how the Akaviri Dragon Guard could have done it, because by piecing lore together. But At the end of the day, the concept of the Dragon Guard creating Dragon Knights is questionable at best. Dragon Knights just exist. There is no lore explanation for them. They, in theory, would have to be Dragonborn in order to use some of their abilities, which, again, doesn't make any fucking sense. Another thing ZeniMax Online Studios really screwed up was Cyrodiil. In the second era, Cyrodiil was supposed to be a swamp, and they went ahead and said, no, that didn't happen. And they gave us some bullshit excuse about how everything was mistranslated. And we all know it wasn't. Tiber Septim used Chim to turn it from a swamp into a forest, and ZeniMax kinda got confused. Now, I don't have a huge problem with ESO lore, other than them trying to make something new and different and utterly failing at it. Now, I really don't have that much of a problem with ESO lore, other than the fact that they changed certain things, and as a result, the lore doesn't make any fucking sense. And you're gonna find that is very common with the Elder Scrolls if you actually delve into the lore, is that you basically gotta make up crap in order for it to make any sense in your mind. Now, I do have a Fallout build in the works, however, it's gonna be some time before I'm ready to reveal that to the world. The next Skyrim build, on the other hand, will probably come a lot faster than this one took to come out. As you can see, block is pretty important to how this is played. Just because some of these enemies are ridiculous compared to others. Some you'll kill in one hit, others will take some time. Now, as I've told to some people before, I will be doing a Skyrim Let's Play series on this channel. I will, of course, be calling it a run because I actually hate the word Let's Play, or words. Either way, that won't be taking into my time very much because my wife will be doing the editing. And 90% of anything I do on YouTube is editing. Now, the Skyrim Let's Play will be using a custom character build made specifically for the Let's Play. The mod list will be in what I call Episode 0, the very first episode of it. And then Episode 1 will have the actual gameplay. First we hit it with Fireball. Then Ice Storm. Then, because I'm scared for my life, Slow Time. Hit him with Mark for Death. Then Elemental Fury. And that's how it's done. With Slow Time, Elemental Fury, turn him into little meaty bits. There's one more Draugr. He is shooting arrows at me. Let's Fus Ro Dah him off. Then we'll just take him down real quick. That did the job. In general, this character's power can be assessed as you gain more shouts, you gain more powers. And he becomes ridiculously overpowered after he has about 6 or 7 different shouts because he can have shouts on all the time. Now, for those of you who've been asking, I do take build suggestions on Reddit. So if you go to reddit.com/r/Zhakaron, I will, in fact, read the posts there. And the Argonian Vampire build I'm planning to do next was a build suggestion there that I then put up for voting. It was voted upon, people liked it, and so I ended up going with it. So definitely post your suggestions if you have any idea of a build that I should make. Keep in mind that when I think about builds and what I want to do, I think about it in terms of interesting game mechanics coupled with an actual tie-in to Elder Scrolls lore. The further back in the lore, the better. But obviously, Oblivion would work, Morrowind would work. Or even just flat-out Skyrim. But typically, the richer the backstory, the more likely I'm going to use it. I also have a Facebook that is Zaric Zhakaron, one word. I live stream on twitch.tv/Zhakaron as to when I'm streaming, when I'm planning to put out a video, so on and so forth. Check out twitter.com/Zaric. I'm very, very unlikely to make a Dragonborn build like this anytime again. One that relies on shouts and dragon lore in general. So enjoy, and I will see y'all next time.